Hello fellow riders and welcome back to another thrilling episode of Talk Moto. Today we're diving into the world of electronic tech for bikers. Whether you're cruising on the open road or navigating busy streets, technology plays a crucial role in enhancing our riding experiences. So in this episode we're going to be exploring the cutting edge gadgets and devices that are becoming essential companions for bikers. From navigation systems that keep us on track to action cameras and intercoms, we'll cover it all in this show. But before we rev up, I want to remind you to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already and leave a review if you're enjoying the show. Your feedback keeps this podcast running like a well-oiled machine. Now let's gear up and dive headfirst into the world of electronic tech for bikers. Get ready for an electrifying ride. If you're a motorcycle junkie who loves hitting the road, why not treat yourself to a fun and practical piece of biking tech? In this show, I've rounded up and I'm going to cover the best functional and thrilling motorcycle gadgets currently on the market for a safe and exciting ride. Whilst there are more than I cover in this show, I'm just going to look at those that I currently use. If there's any companies out there that want me to have a look at something that they produce, by all means drop me a line and I'll get in touch, and I'll be more than happy to share my findings with you guys listening. Coming up in this show, I'll be looking at gadgets for capturing your rides from the likes of GoPro and Insta360, different options for navigation systems and sat-navs, to your mobile phone apps, and how I mount these on my bike. To round the show up, we'll be having a look at helmet and communication intercoms. So without further ado, let's jump on and get stuck in. So the first lineup in my list is action cameras. So the first action camera I ever purchased was a Drift 1080 HD action camera, which mounted neatly on the side of my helmet. But it wasn't long after starting using this that I ended up transitioning into using a GoPro, and the first GoPro that I had was the GoPro Hero 3. So launched in 2004, GoPro have been producing cameras, and more specifically action cameras, for almost 20 years. The rising popularity of them sees them a firm choice for most sports enthusiasts and budding filmmakers, least of all bikers. At the time of putting this show together, there's currently 26 different models launched from GoPro Hero 3, right up to the latest GoPro Hero 12, which will set you back around £400 or just over $480. They've come a long way since their first cameras, and I think the first one I ever bought, the Hero 3, was back in 2007, so it was one of the first. I lost this from the back of my bike on a ride when the mounting arm snapped, never to be seen again, as I didn't even realise it had gone until I got home. But I soon replaced this, thankfully through my insurance, with a GoPro Hero 4, which I owned for a good 10 years before it decided one day to just die on me. I'm currently using the Hero 9, which I've little need to upgrade to anything newer as yet, and happily shoots 5K at 30 frames per second or 4K at 120 frames per second, so it's more than enough for those who simply upload their biking antiques to YouTube like I do. Of course, GoPro aren't the only action camera name out there and directly compete with the likes of Insta360, Garmin, and of course my predecessor, Drift. Although I've not heard of Drift for a while, and their latest camera only offers 4K at 30 frames per second, and with a price point of £250 or $300, it's not quite up to GoPro's spec, although it's a good £150 cheaper. As well as my GoPro 9, I've also started using, and may possibly end up using as standard, an Insta360 One X2 360 camera. It'll shoot 5.7K at 30 frames per second like my GoPro Hero 9, but it has a camera on both the front and the back of the unit to capture a full 360 perspective of my ride, rather than just the 158 degrees at its best from the GoPro. Obviously this will mean a fair bit more post-production editing to enable you to cherry pick what you want to focus on the view, but it opens up a whole new world of shooting, for me anyway. I'm still playing around with how I can just shoot my rides and upload the 360 footage straight to YouTube, so you can watch it back through a VR headset to get the full 360 immersive experience. If there's anyone out there that knows exactly how to do this, please get in touch with me on the show and help a brother out, as it's doing my head in trying to fathom this one out. We'll get onto intercoms later on in the show, but SENA, one of the leaders in that field, has also released an intercom that incorporates a camera, a two-in-one device if you like. I've no idea how good they are because I've not met anyone or heard of anyone that's even got one, so I don't know how they stand up against the other action cameras, but they do shoot at 4K at 30 frames per second and offer image stabilisation at 1080p and 60 and 30 frames per second. So whilst it's not in the same image quality league as the likes of your GoPro, the fact that everything for two products is combined into one smaller unit probably appeals to some more than others. I'll save it for another show, but I actually use my intercom to capture the audio from both my own as well as my pillion or other riders connected to me into my GoPro for a whole new world of vlogging, but I warn you, it's proper fiddly until you find that sweet spot for your sound. The only other gadget that I'm aware of in this field, and my brother has this on his bike, but it's intended more as a bike equivalent dash cam, and is made by a company called Innov, and that's the Innov K5. And this is their flagship device that you mount permanently on your bike, and it comes with both front and rear cameras that will capture 4K Ultra HD and 1080p Full HD loop recording whilst you ride. As I mentioned, it's intended more as a security camera device more than a point of view camera, so it'll have a fixed 120 degree field of view, but as far as I'm aware it may also help reduce your insurance premiums and currently costs £399 or $486. Next on the list are sat-navs. So when it comes to satellite navigation options, whether you opt for one of the many mobile phone apps out there or a standalone sat-nav device, there's more than enough on the market to offer. I've used a fair few of the mobile apps, from the trusty old Google Maps to one of the more intuitive third-party apps such as Calimoto, Riva or Reva, however you pronounce it, or Scenic. The options are massive. Calimoto is one of the preferred apps that I use, but I now use the desktop version to plan my route and then use that map to navigate through a standalone sat-nav device. The one that I use at the minute is the Garmin Zumo XT. I just find it a bit easier having an actual sat-nav system on my bike rather than trying to strain my eyes while I'm riding to look at my phone. Some of the newer model bikes, specifically adventure and touring bikes, have built-in navigation devices, but I'm not sure how easy these integrate with uploading your own maps, so I'll leave that one for a later show. I've found having a route to follow, especially as a solo rider, it's something that gives me a little more structure to a ride. I don't always ride alone, but when I do, it's nice to have a destination in mind, somewhere that I can aim to stop, stretch my legs, have a brew and a bacon butty before setting off again. The app Calimoto I find is a great tool for this, especially in the UK. I've tried the app Reva, but it just seemed a little clunky and it wasn't as idiot-proof as Calimoto is. I'll add at this point that me plugging Calimoto is simply a personal preference, and I'm not affiliated in any way with the developers or praising their app for any personal gain. In fact, I use the free version anyway, so it doesn't make any difference, and I'll explain why. So Calimoto is a route navigation app that works both on your mobile phone as well as on a desktop computer. It allows you to plan, navigate, record and even find and share routes both locally as well as worldwide. So they have a free basic version that you can register with to use, but also have various premium versions. I've tried the premium version a couple of years ago, and to be honest, I couldn't really see a benefit for my requirement, so I stuck to the free version. You can get the app to plan a route for you based on where you are and where you want to go. A bit like Google Maps, you can get the app to avoid certain criteria on routes such as motorways, toll roads, etc. But unlike Google Maps, you can ask the app to plan your ride to incorporate a more winding route, or if you feel really adventurous, a twisty route. I will add that as of July this year, 2023, more advanced features are only included with paid versions only and range from £65 a year for the full premium version, which has a £13 a month option, or £260 for the full maps option, but has less features, so I'm not actually sure what this is. And to be honest, I couldn't be bothered looking as far into it as that. You used to be able to use the Twisty Maps option for free on the desktop versions, save your maps to My Trips, then open it on your phone app version and use it there. The map doesn't know it's a twisty route and just navigates you according to the chosen route. They've obviously cottoned on to this now and have implemented restrictions accordingly. Alternatively, what I've taken to doing is on the desktop version, either plan a trip or a route from where you're setting off from to where you want to go, let the app plot a route and then go into it more closely and tweak it. Obviously this is more time consuming, but as I've found when I use the twisty route mode, it can have you detouring from a decent road around the houses and back onto the same route for the sake of making it more twisty. So the fact that you now have to pay for this feature is no loss in my opinion. What I tend to do is use the winding roads route and just follow that. You can of course edit this as you wish to incorporate or omit certain sections of the route, or to incorporate specific roads or stop points into your map. Once I've created a route, I'll then save it and export it from Calimoto as a .gpx file to my laptop to upload to my phone, and then onto my sat-nav. Now, as with all things tech, especially sat-nav units, map files that sat-navs read are called .gpx files. So in the same way that documents might be PDF files, or photos might be EPSs or JPEGs, navigation units use the GPX suffix at the end of their files in order to read them into, or in this case, be able to upload them to my Garmin sat-nav. With a bit of jiggery pokery, I can then get my Garmin to use this map and then follow it as any normal navigation map. I won't go into the intricacies of how you send it from your desktop to your phone and then upload it over Bluetooth, or save it to a memory card and get it onto your sat-nav, but if anyone's struggling with this, give me a shout on the email address in the description and I'll go through it. It does actually sound more fiddly than it is, and honestly it takes minutes to get it from one device onto another. There's an absolute ton of avenues I could go off on with this show, so I'm just going to keep this one specifically to the tech and gadgets that I use for the sake of keeping it relevant. So whilst we're on the subject of sat-navs and mobile devices, it's probably worth mentioning what I use to mount my phone on my bike. Again, there's a few items on the market, but as I like to research the hell out of any tech before I go spending my hard-earned cash on it, there really is only one leading option in this field, and that's quad lock. It's not the cheapest option out there, but they are good and they work. With a multitude of different mounting brackets from handlebar to windscreen, I initially opted for the quad lock handlebar mount. As I say, they're not the cheapest action mount out there, and at 40 quid for the mount, and then you'll need the quad lock compatible case for your phone, which will set you back another 23 quid or so, depending on your phone model, so over 60 quid, it's not the cheapest option. I did look for cheaper knockoff versions on eBay and was surprised to find that there's a cheaper alternative that's actually compatible with the quad lock case for a fraction of the cost, and it looks identical to the handlebar mount. That's right, for less than a quarter of the cost of the real quad lock mount, you can buy a cheap Chinese replica that's almost identical and served me well up until I bought my Garmin sat-nav, and then I took to keeping my phone in my pocket, so it made the mount redundant. If you buy the eBay version, it comes with a universal self-adhesive attachment for the back of your phone to clip into the holder, which is compatible with the actual quad lock mount. The only thing that I would add to this is that the adhesive on the back of the universal adapter is paper for some reason. It's not very good. So I ended up removing that and I used Gorilla Glue to attach it to the back of an aftermarket phone cover. So this saved me wrecking the back of my phone. The other thing to take into account as well is that there's been numerous reports of mobile phones becoming damaged, especially the gyroscopes in the newer model cameras when mounted to the quad lock mounts. So unless you shell out an additional 15 quid for the quad lock vibration dampener, again, eBay sell these for less than £5. Like with the other gadgets in this list, there are alternative options from brands such as RAM and Ultimate add-ons. I used to have the RAM X-Grip, but I'll be honest, even when I bought the rubber tether for it, it wobbled around too much for my liking, and I was always paranoid about losing my phone, so I ended up ditching it in favour of quad lock. The last section I'm going to cover in this show is on helmet intercoms. Now this section will no doubt raise a difference of opinion between some of you listening to this show, as I can personally vouch for. I've seen numerous posts on social media groups over the years asking for which is the best unit to go for, and the replies being split between those who use them and their recommendations, and those who seem to be dead against them and prefer the sound of the road. Personally, I feel it's each to their own, and I choose to use one. For those who do use them, I think it's a two-horse race, like the divide between Mac and PC, Apple and Android, and thankfully Apple don't make helmet intercoms, or is that only a matter of time? The front runners in this race are CARDO and SENA, or SENA. I use CARDOs. I've kind of grown up with CARDO as far as my biking's concerned anyway. I first got hold of the CARDO Scala Rider G9 unit when it first launched back in 2012. And the only reason that I ended up upgrading to the PackTalk Bold unit I use today was that I needed two units so that I can connect to my pillion. And what better excuse than to upgrade my tech? So if like me your pillion's your better half, this might be all the excuse you need to not bother with an intercom. I'm saying nothing. I've owned my unit for a little over 12 months and CARDO has just released their latest unit, the PackTalk Edge. There are slight differences between the PackTalk Edge unit compared to the PackTalk Bold, but for me they're not quite enough that I feel that I need to upgrade so soon. The biggest being that the newer unit is magnetically attached to your helmet, whereas the one that I have is held on by a clip mount, which I personally find a little more secure. Sound is provided through large JBL speakers which will effortlessly mount into the majority of helmets. They offer Bluetooth and mesh technology and connect up to 15 riders simultaneously and offer both internal FM radio as well as Bluetooth connectivity to your mobile phone, sat-nav or other compatible devices. I have mine connected to both my phone and my Garmin Zumo sat-nav, so I can not only answer phone calls on the road, but I can also listen to music and receive directions from my sat-nav. and the sound is provided by the JBL 40mm speakers. Intercoms are apparently too much for some who opt for a techless ride and divide an opinion with it's dangerous or too much distraction and you can't hear what's going on around you. I disagree, but as I stated earlier, it's personal opinion and personal choice. I already suffer with tinnitus, so for me having music playing in the background is less distracting than the wind monotonously rattling round inside my lid or the constant high-pitched whine of tinnitus ringing in my ears. So SENA, or SENA, is the biggest rival to CARDO and offers both similarly priced and feature-packed units. The 50S is SENA's latest unit with both Bluetooth and mesh like CARDO and have their sound supplied by Harman Kardon speakers. So like the CARDO, they've stepped up their game to provide the best sound quality, which, let's face it, that's what you're paying for. Unlike the CARDO unit, the SENA isn't waterproof, which seems a little crazy considering the unit's mounted on a helmet that's exposed to the elements, and if you're somebody that rides in all weathers, and it was a swinging factor for me when I was trying to choose between the two. That being said, my brother uses the 50S and has ridden with his in the rain around Scotland and never complained of any issues. For some reason, the SENA and CARDO won't connect to each other over mesh, only over Bluetooth. And when I asked the guy from CARDO about this, I was debating which one to buy. He informed me that CARDO actually invented the mesh technology and SENA copied it, but not to the same level. And for that reason, CARDO was actually more refined. How true this is, I can't verify it. He actually recommended me to buy whichever brand the majority of my mates had, which, if I was going with my brother and his mates, I would have actually been better off buying the SENA. But I ended up staying loyal to CARDO and buying the Pack Talk Bold units, and they've not disappointed. The sound's clear, particularly between me and my pillion. They're plenty loud enough, and the voice-activated commands are much better than its predecessor unit that I owned. So to explain what mesh technology is, refers more to how the units connect seamlessly to one another. More specifically, how can you connect to your mates if there's 2, 3, 4 or more riders all on the same channel? Where one rider and their pillion are concerned, it's not a major issue as they're never going to be more than a few inches away from each other, unless they're off of the bike. So let's say that you and 5 mates are out for a ride and you've all got the same units, and this applies to both CARDO and SENA brands as they do work the same. On older intercom units you'd be daisy chained together and you could all communicate as long as you were within range of each other. Again, all units are affected differently depending on where you ride. That range will be significantly reduced if you're riding in areas with a lot of signals from sources such as Wi-Fi, radio, etc. But generally speaking, if you're riding out in the countryside with minimal interference, the range should be fairly decent. Now let's say Rider 1 is connected to Rider 6 through the other riders, so Rider 1 to Rider 2, Rider 2 to Rider 3 and so on. If one of those riders in between that link becomes separated or loses a signal, the battery dies, etc., Rider 1's now disconnected from the other riders and that chain is broken. But not with mesh. With mesh, everyone's connected together, regardless of who's connected to who, hence the mesh. My brother found this out on a trip through Europe with his mates when he passed a group of German bikers approaching from the opposite direction. Their mesh automatically connected them to my brother's group as they were all using SENA, so they were all talking to each other, albeit in different languages, so I can't imagine how that one turned out. So CARDO calls their setup DMC, or Dynamic Mesh Communication, and they class this as a revolutionary concept from them. SENA class theirs as Mesh Intercom Network Technology. So in essence, if you're spending money on a bike intercom system that sells itself on featuring mesh, you'll be getting the same features as either CARDO or SENA. I found the biggest issue with intercom systems is trying to pair them with different intercoms, either on the same brand or different, and usually ends up being a trial and error lengthy process to get them to actually communicate with one another. But rest assured, once you've got them connected, it's plain sailing from then on out. Another feature I like about using an intercom on my bike is if I get a phone call, and particularly if you have a sat-nav linked to your phone so that you can see who's calling you, I can answer my phone whilst I'm riding my bike without even taking the hands off the bars. Intercoms normally, unless you have a strong accent, and then it might either not understand what you've said or it'll probably misunderstand you and do something completely different. They normally work by voice command, pretty much in the same way as your home Alexa does. My CARDO unit receives instructions by me saying, "Hey CARDO," but then it'll also jump over to get my actual phone to do things like skip music track, answer call, or end call by using normal "Hey Siri" or "OK Google," or whatever voice command you normally use. It's quite clever stuff really. Maybe one day technology will become that advanced that we won't even need to leave the house to actually go out for a ride. What scary and depressing thought. There's a lot of other tech I could cover in this show, from heated jackets and gloves to electronic security or charging gadgets. The list is plentiful. The only other piece of tech that I often take out with me when I'm out on the bike, and as I mentioned in the show that I did when I rode around Southern Ireland on the Wild Atlantic Way, is my trusty DJI Mini 2 drone. So whilst it's not strictly speaking bike specific, it is a great addition to anyone's arsenal of gadgets. It's not the cheapest way to get photos or video of your biking escapades, but it certainly adds a different perspective from a bird's eye view. I'll leave it there, as using a drone with a bike isn't exactly groundbreaking news, as I'm sure a lot of you have seen countless times on YouTube if you're familiar with the likes of moto fields. So without any more waffle, I'll wrap this show up. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope I've given you a small amount of insight into just some of the electronic wizardry I own and use when out riding. Why not get in touch with the show and share some of the thoughts of the gadgets that you like using, or perhaps hate? If you've liked what you heard on the show today, please consider subscribing or leaving a review, or just share the show with your mates. Your feedback's always greatly appreciated and gives me some insight into how the show's going. Don't forget to connect with us on social media to stay updated when a new show is released, and for information on upcoming shows, or to simply engage with me here at Talk Moto. As ever, the email address is talkmotouk@gmail.com, and we're also on Twitter at TalkMotoUK. So until next time, keep riding, stay safe, keep it shiny side up, and most importantly, keep listening, and I'll catch you all in the next episode.